Have you heard about the new miracle weight loss jab? We live in a society saturated with body image pressure, fueled by unrealistic social media standards and a multi-billion-pound diet industry. But for many, the relationship with food isn't just a matter of willpower. It's a complex battle involving shame, guilt, and even mental health conditions like body dysmorphia. Today, we're opening the door on a topic often kept in the shadows: how the church can respond with compassion to the rise of weight loss drugs and the hidden struggles of eating disorders. We'll be discussing the seeming answer to prayer offered by new weight loss injections and the alarming 84% increase in hospital admissions for young people with eating disorders since the pandemic. We'll also explore a growing concern: bigorexia, or muscle dysmorphia amongst teenage boys. I'm Melanie Cave, Managing Director at Roots, and today I'm joined by two women from the charity Taste Life UK. Di Archer is the founder of Taste Life. Her passion was born out of the experience of supporting her own daughters through severe eating disorders, leading her to create the accredited Taste Life Community Recovery course. Cherry Dakin joined the team in 2020, bringing her background in teaching and her own lived experience of full recovery from an eating disorder. Together, they educate churches and youth groups on how to move from a culture of judgment to one of healing and grace. Di and Cherry help us understand that because we all have to eat, we all need to talk about it, and that God meets us exactly where we are, even in the muck and mess of our struggles. Thanks for joining us on the Roots for Churches podcast. Here we go. Welcome, Di and Cherry, to the Roots for Churches podcast. Fantastic to have you with us today.
Thank you. Nice
for
to be
us.
Here.
So I'd love to hear just a bit about your personal stories and your interest. How did you get involved with Taste Life, with the issues around eating disorders, body dysmorphia, weight loss drugs, all of those topics? They're not your sort of standard run-of-the-mill. How did you get interested and involved in this area?
I think I should probably start with that one, Melanie. So I guess not something I perhaps would have chosen, but we had two daughters who were affected by eating disorders, one of them most severely, and it was a very difficult and long journey. We were kind of thrown in the deep end because we knew nothing about eating disorders or anything like that, in fact. So we were sort of thrown in the deep end, and I guess through that very difficult experience, we discovered two things about eating disorders that we didn't know before, because our eldest daughter in particular was affected by a sort of combination of bulimia and anorexia, which meant she was very ill. And we discovered, that eating disorders are horrible. They're really mean. They're really cruel. They lie. They steal life just from the person directly affected, but also family and friends as well. And the other thing we discovered was that help and understanding are limited still. They were back then, and they still are. And so I suppose as our daughters began to recover, due to a wonderful friend who was an eating disorder counsellor who helped us along the way, we thought our church was doing a big outreach thing based on what's God put on your heart to do for him. And at that time, I can remember it so clearly. Jean and I looked at each other and we thought, well, we better do something about eating disorders. I mean, now I look back, I think, what were we thinking? What were we thinking? But it was like, okay, what's missing? What would we have wanted that would have really helped at the time? What's missing? Let's just make it. So that's how it kind of started we basically created a resource that was for families and friends, as well as the person directly affected. It's now the Taste Life Community Recovery course. It's an 8-session course, and it's for everyone affected, not just the direct person, and for any kind of eating issue. It's a really safe educational place where people can learn, okay, what's happened to me? Because we were like, none of us knew what happened to our daughter. And how did we get here? And what is it all about? And how do we start taking those tiny steps out of eating issues and back into life again, actually? So then, anyway, briefly, we made this course, we honed it, we got it accredited by the University of Brighton Health Sciences, and then we sort of published it and thought our work was done. Because everything, teaching, discussion, stories of recovery, it's all there. But people said, no, we're much too scared to go into this world without some training and some confidence. So then we were like, So we started training people, created the charity, and now we do prevention and education as well. But that's me. That's me. Terry.
Yeah. So my journey into the world of eating disorders began because I had an eating disorder, which started around the age of 15. And I struggled with mainly bulimia throughout those years that I was struggling with the eating disorder. It was around about the age of 27 that I recovered, and I recovered fully. And since then, I've always had a heart to help people who have been struggling themselves or maybe are caring for someone struggling. I then went into teaching. So I taught in a secondary school for a few years, and I noticed how it was a girls' school I was in. I noticed how the girls were constantly talking about their body, their shape, their size, and it was dieting this and another dieting fad. And I just felt like saying, just don't do it. Don't do it, because it messes things up. And so ever since then, I've just really wanted to help, particularly young people, to understand, I guess, what the dangers are around messing with your diet and everything that goes on behind the scenes of an eating disorder. It's those things that contribute to the eating disorder, and trying to make them aware of this is something that I really wanted to do. And then lo and behold, Taste Life came along into my life, and I initially trained as a leader. In 2018, I ran a course, and then COVID hit. And then I saw an advert for a job, and I thought, that's the job I want to do. So I applied, got the job, joined the team. That was 2020. And I've absolutely loved being a part of the team and getting the message out there and helping people understand what eating disorders really are about, and look at how we can help young people in particular avoid going down that route of developing an eating disorder. And so my job has been working really with the youth track resource, understanding eating disorders, but also one that we've developed specifically for churches, church youth groups. It's called Food, Feelings and Faith. Like the community course, it's accredited and it's very, very well received. And it's all about how do we avoid young people going down the route of developing an eating disorder. So yeah, that's my story, that's my background, and that's why I'm here today. And it's brilliant to be here.
Thank you for sharing. So can we unpack this whole sort of area of eating disorders? So both of you talked about this affecting girls, often teenage girls, but I'm aware that eating disorders is like a blanket term that covers quite a lot of things. And it doesn't just apply to maybe middle class girls in their teens, that eating disorders cover a whole range of things. It can apply to elite athletes, it can apply to young men, it can apply to people of any age and any race and any sort of ethno-demographic setting. Now, can you just give us some statistics on, like, who does this impact? How widespread is it? Is this very niche, or is this a big societal problem?
Well, that's a great question. That's a massive question, by the way, Melanie. But you're absolutely right. I think one of the things, because we used to think it was just young teenage girls, and certainly between the ages of like 14 to sort of 26, you're most vulnerable for starting an eating disorder. But when we started running a course, I think the thing that surprised us was that there is no age. There is no age that is not represented. And we've had people up into their 70s saying, such a relief. I've never been able to talk about any of this before. And you're right also that it's a spectrum. It's not like eating disorders are over here and they're very tightly defined. It's a spectrum. So lots of people struggle with their relationship with food. I think that statistically, people are finally starting to count properly. But back when we started, there was a parliamentary debate where back in 2014, I think, where they reckon there was about 4 million people affected. I think they're involved in campaigning for better treatment for those struggling with eating issues. And recently, I think the actual figures are backing that up, because people weren't being counted. Whereas now it's like the other day, it was like 3 million, definitely. But if you think about it, they're only the people that they know about because they've come to some kind of GP or hospital. So if you think about, actually, there's all those people who know they're struggling but aren't going to talk to anyone at the moment. There's all, and then there's all those people who don't actually know that their relationship with food is causing
Yeah.
a problem, because a lot of this is denial. I mean, certainly that applied to our daughter. So certainly no age barrier, no ethnic barrier. You're right about all of those things. Cherry, do you want to say anything about the other sort of things that can creep in around it as well, like exercise and so on?
Yeah, particularly with young people today, with the social media and how that's impacting the rise in the number of young people being admitted to hospital. One statistic is that there's been an 84% increase of hospital admissions of children and young people since the pandemic. It's unreal. So that's hospital admissions. We've also had a 40% increase in the number of young people accessing eating disorder services since the pandemic. And the system is clearly struggling. They are now changing and trying to improve the system. But yeah, it's a statistic which is really alarming. And particularly for young boys, they're now recognizing that more and more boys and young men are struggling. So the fastest growing statistic is actually around boys and young men being diagnosed with an eating disorder. So they think that doesn't sound like a big figure, but around 5% of boys and young men have a suspected eating disorder. But when you put that into the context of the population, you're talking about 2 to 2.4 million boys and young men affected. That's a huge number.
Yeah.
Huge.
That is huge. And if you think of a youth group, that's likely in most youth groups, that's at least one of the boys, So I guess I want to say, what's changed? Where is this coming from? What's the underlying sort of root cause? And maybe it's with every person, I'm sure, like our mental health, our emotional well-being, there's multiple causes. But would you say that there's the sort of things that have changed in society, or that has just accelerated this? Or is this an outworking of the sort of general anxiety epidemic that we're having post-COVID?
Do you want to take that one, Cherry?
I'd say it is a combination of things. COVID and the pandemic changed a lot of people. As you say, anxiety has become much more prevalent amongst the general population, but particularly amongst teenagers. But I think it's also because of the growing use of social media. I mean, it is not the only factor, but it is a big factor in the increase in this anxiety around food and what we eat, or what we should eat, or what we shouldn't eat. I think there's this massive amount of information out there now at our fingertips 24/7. And when you're a teenager, and yet that's in your hands, much of the time, is going to impact on your beliefs about who you are. Are you acceptable? Are you not acceptable? And a lot of it is focusing around what we look like. Our body image has become so important for many, many young people. But it's not just young people. It's, adults as well. Wouldn't you agree, Di?
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's that, we've all often talked in the past about objectification of women's bodies in particular. But I think now it's applied to both men and women and we can do it to ourselves. So self-objectification as well. There's filters and all sorts, and we're trying to make us, the pressure is that you are going to be acceptable and okay if you look a certain way. And I mean, I think that's always been true to a certain extent. That's always been, especially since the advent of more, over the last kind of century, of more communication between communities and around the world. I think it's always been true. But I totally agree, Sherry. It's complete. And if you look at the figures, it's completely, anxiety started to go up from 2008 when smartphones were in people's hands. That's when the figures started to go up. And it's not surprising that it's going to affect the way that people eat, is it? Because that's obviously linked. But I do think there's other things in society that have changed as well that don't help. One of the things that we do on the Taste Life course is to try and some of the instinctive shame that people feel because they've got a complicated relationship with food, whatever that is. So it might be restricting, it might be, purging, it might be overeating or eating more than you need, or any combination, and many other things as well. There's lots of eating disorders out there or eating issues out there. But I think one of the other things that's happened is that we've made food very complicated in itself. So, even if you're going to buy a tin of tomatoes, there's about 8 different producers, 8 different looks, 8 different prices. And we've got a plethora of choice, and I think we've made everything so complicated. So 1, it's complicated. 2, there's this whole thing now about ultra processed foods that is coming more into, I think, mainstream awareness for people. I think that really doesn't help because a lot of them are made to be addictive so that people buy more of them, but they don't look like they are. So it's really difficult to get to the truth about things. So then people turn to, well, what is the government saying? What's the NHS saying? And it's really hard to keep up with all of it. 1 minute, eggs is always the classic example, isn't it? Don't eat too many eggs. Oh, yes, eat eggs. So if it's conflicting all the time, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think there's conflicting advice as well. We're living faster lives and we've got microwaves. So isn't it so much easier just to get something to put in the microwave to just heat up? So whereas, thankfully in some countries there's still the individual, let's take time to produce some food for us to all enjoy, sit around together and talk. That's how it's been forever. And we've changed all of that. And I think it's really complicated. So it's not people's fault. Really want to say that very strongly. Eating disorders are never an individual's fault. We live in this complex society where there's so many difficult things happening. And I think my husband would say there's so much pressure now with information coming in. We get into overload and it's, we're not quite sure how to deal with that. So actually, if you're this way inclined, then actually having something with its high in fat and sugar just makes you feel better. It literally makes you feel better because, and actually it's the same effect if you restrict food because your body produces chemicals to make you feel better. So, if we're living in a society that is geared to making us feel like we need things, we want things, then food is one behavior, is a way that people can turn to instinctively. Like I said, it's never a fault thing.
And this is one of those challenges around eating disorders, is that it's not just physical and it's not just mental and it's not just emotional. And maybe it is also spiritual, that it's got the crossover. There's elements of the chemicals going on in your body through all of these things that are addictive. There's behavior, there's social stuff, there's internal stuff. It's just really complicated. And so, yeah, because it's complicated, I think churches and church leaders and church youth group, they might be like, this is too hard or this is too nuanced for every person. How do we engage with this? So I wonder if you could give us a little bit of a window into how does our theology, or how do we think of this through a God lens, a Bible lens? Where is God in all of this? Obviously, it's a problem young people and people of all ages are struggling with, but it almost feels like, is this outside of the remit of the church? Is this something we should leave to the mental health or the NHS specialists? Or should we get involved? Is this something where we need to be part of this conversation?
I'll leave Terry to talk in a minute about why we created food, feelings and faith, because it's very relevant to your question. But I think, one of the good things is we are talking about mental health now more, aren't we? So that is good, but it feels like eating disorders are always the Cinderella of mental health, and they're really difficult for people to talk about. So I think number one for leaders in churches, it would be really good if we gave people permission to talk about food issues. I think the reason it's so difficult, it's not just because it's complicated, it's because it feels so personal and people feel like they're criticizing themselves. If they're struggling with food, they're going to be criticizing themselves for that. They don't want anyone else to do that as well. They're very liable to, therefore there's a kind of like why people need training to walk into trying to help people because this is a difficult area. However, anything personal is always, not a problem for God, is it? The ultimate personal God, who came and modeled the amazing humanity for us. So there's something about it is a lot of permission giving, I think, in this. Like, let's open this difficult topic because we're all in this boat together. We're all in the same society. Let's be honest about the fact that we all got different bodies and some of them put on weight easily and some of them don't, and all of that kind of stuff. There's a lot of genetics at play here. So let's try. Our number one thing is always to try and lift that kind of shame thing so that we can talk about it. So one, let's talk about it. And two, let's give some general guidelines so that we're not criticizing, but we are helping each other. And I think, let's put we're all doing this together. This is a journey we're doing together. It's not like, okay, that you've got it right and I've got it wrong, because we've all got some kind of complexity in our relationships with food, because it's all tied up with other things, with our history, with how we were brought up, with emotions as well, how we felt about eating cottage pie, that just is that comfort food. Why is it comfort food? That whatever it is that takes us back to childhood experiences, how we experience love, all of that kind of is perfectly normal. And feel like we did some research with Worcester and Coventry universities on spirituality and eating disorders, journey of eating disorders. And we discovered we looked at all sorts of things, including social media, the effect of that. But we also looked at how people felt about their church community, especially if they got an open acknowledged eating disorder. And it was like a really mixed bag. So some of them felt like their church community was amazing, really, really helpful, loved the fact that they were prayed for, supported, and this applied to families as well, no matter the age of the person struggling. Some of them, however, felt like they were being criticized, judged. People said the wrong thing. Not that you can make it worse by saying the wrong thing, just say that quickly, but unhelpful things. Let's say unhelpful things like, well, why don't you just eat? Or why don't you just stop eating? Yeah. And if you could, you would. So it's obviously not that. Want to imply that perhaps there's something spiritually unhelpful going on there and cast it out. All of those things. So I think for some people, especially if they've been brought up in Christian communities, they can feel worse about, I'm not on top of my relationship with food. But it's like, well, I'm an eating disorder, but I've had counselling for other things that I've no way been on top of. So, it's just stuff, and we all have stuff.
Yeah.
Terry, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, so it is true. We all have stuff, and a lot of people do turn to food. We've all got our comfort foods and our favourite foods, and actually that's part of normal eating. So we've all had different relationships with food at different times in our lives, but not everybody goes on to develop an eating disorder. So I think the thing that we feel is really, really important around this whole prevention and getting the conversation going around, in churches in particular, around eating disorders and our relationship with food, is giving people permission to talk about it. And I think that's why it's so important to have resources, such as for the kids with food, feelings and faith. The feedback that we've had is that it's really given them the language and the space and the permission to talk about food. And I always quote this, but Di once said, well, we've all got to eat, so let's talk about it. So, we all have to do it every day. But for some people, that relationship with food becomes so fraught that what should be a pleasurable, enjoyable experience becomes very, it just becomes full of angst. And I think if we can do anything to open up this conversation where we're all able to talk about food, will help to reduce that anxiety, because quite often with eating disorders, you feel like you're the only one who has this feeling or this relationship with food, whether it's restricting or overeating. And that's often what we hear in our community course as well, is people say, it's such a relief to hear that other people are having the same thoughts and struggles that I have. And it's that feeling, I'm not alone. And so I think sort of going back a bit is allowing that space to happen in a safe environment, whether it's, within the church or in a youth group, to actually, okay, let's just talk about it and let's give people the permission to discuss it.
I was thinking too, we've produced a little leaflet that what does God think about eating disorders? Because I think it's such a massive and relevant question. And our sort of starting point is, food is a good gift from a good God. That's where we're coming from. And I think for people where their relationship with food gets complicated, that goes out of the window. You kind of lose sight of that. And is it fuel for the day, or is it a friend, or is it a foe? And it can be sort of kind of circles around all of those things. And so I think that actually, again, it's to do with the permission giving, isn't it? And for me, this is what Taste Life is built on. It's built on the conviction that God comes to us no matter where we are, no matter what it is, no matter how desperate we feel, no matter how beyond him or outside him that we feel. So it's so easy for us to project on God how we're feeling about ourselves, whereas actually he is a good, loving, appropriate Father. He is good and he is Father, and that's how Jesus addressed him. And when my daughter was at the depths of the eating disorder, she had a kind of, which says she knows doesn't happen to everyone, but she had this kind of sort of picture experience, if you like, of God when we were at a Christian festival. And she was at that point where she'd eaten so little that she couldn't even stand up type thing. And she was like face down in the mud and the muck of her picture was, I'm just in the muck. I'm in the mess of where I've got myself to. And she just had this picture of like, well, I can't get up. I'm done. I just don't know what to do. I don't know how to recover. I don't know anything. I've had enough. And in her picture, she saw this, these 2 feet walking towards her. And she thought, if this person tries to make me get up, I'm not going to. I can't. I haven't got any energy. And this person sat down next to her and then lay down next to her and put his face in the muck and the dirt that she was in with her. And then he turned his face towards her and said, whenever you're ready. And for her, that was like a profound experience of, I mean, she knew, she was like, that has to be Jesus. No one else would do that. And for her, it was like, I've been seen, I am seen, I am known, and he will come where I am. I don't have to try and get somewhere else. He comes to us. And that's the whole thing about incarnation, isn't it? He comes to us. And that was it wasn't the end of the story for her, but it was a very important turning point. And that's kind of, for me, what Taste Life's built on. God will come. He comes to where we are if we just allow him to do that. Eating disorders are no more difficult for him than anything else that we present him with in who we are. And so I think sort of my theology on it is that good gift, good God, and a good Father who will come and start us on the journey to a healthier relationship, not just with food, because that's just a symptom, but with life, with ourselves, with our emotions, that kind of stuff.
Because I sometimes think in church, it depends on which kind of flavor of church you're in, but sometimes church will be quite cerebral, almost like the body is an afterthought, and that it's all about, going to heaven. People imagine heaven as being like a disembodied space. None of this is particularly theologically correct, but that's almost, even in our words and the songs that we sing, you can get that feeling. And even if you pushed maybe the minister or the vicar, they'd be like, oh, no, I don't think that. But almost in our imagination, it feels like spirituality is this thing that doesn't have a body. And there is that confusion then of like, wait a minute, Jesus had a body and we will get resurrection bodies. And then you kind of get the other end of the spectrum where, when Paul says that the body is a temple for the Holy Spirit and, that we need to take care of our bodies because, we have Jesus, we have the Holy Spirit living within us. But almost that can then get skewed to the other end of the extreme of like almost an idolatry of the physical body of like, well, my body's a temple, I best not eat anything unhealthy, you have to go to the gym. And so again, you can get this sort of skewed, I think it goes towards beauty, it goes towards this sort of the gym body, almost worshipping exercise and feeling okay about yourself because I've ticked off these exercise or physical goals. And so within Christian churches, you can get a whole bunch of people who have sort of one end or the other. And I think, as you say, we don't talk about it enough, or we don't name this thing enough to have a healthy theology of a body, a healthy theology of eating. So yes, we could run a course and we could talk about this within a youth group or even within a small group in our church. But is there something you want to say to like preachers or church leaders about how do we hold a theology, or even in all of our sermons, what framework of thinking about the body and how we look after ourselves, what would be more helpful? What needs to be said that isn't being said enough?
I think that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. I think this is a journey. It's not a right, well, just do this and it'll be fine.
It's never that simple.
No, it isn't. Because, let's face it, our church leaders have issues with food as well.
Yeah, maybe that's part of why we don't talk about it. It's a bit too close to home.
Yeah, and I think actually what we say sometimes is, if you do want to tackle it, then gather some other people around you first who are, maybe mental health specialists, or maybe lived experience, or maybe just really care about it, so that it's not just it's not just you, but you're trying to start to build that kind of community where you're allowed to talk about this. And here's some amazing resources, obviously from Taste Life, and here's some things you could do, and here's a sort of outline for maybe a talk you could give, that kind of stuff. Because it's a journey, it's a chipping away, because it's so unusual. But I just feel, who did I talk to the other day was saying about, no, I read it somewhere, about they think black churches are much better at this than white church, because, they have a much more integrated theology of the body. Even like, they're happy to sway, they're happy to think, whereas we're a little bit, it's not just Christians, it's,
It's cultural as well.
It's cultural.
Yeah.
We're a bit stiff upper lip still, and have made this division. And there's also some, theology in there from way back. But I think just breaking through that, and I honestly think this could be an amazing opportunity. Now, I mean, just thinking about the obsession with weight loss drugs, for example, at least 2.5 million people are taking them. There will be people in your church that are taking them. Is on, statistics so far say that when you stop taking them, you will put weight. 90% of people put weight back on. Only 10% won't. And it's another, they are wonderful for some people. But what I'm trying to say is the quick fix thing is very rarely how God works.
Yeah.
And whereas actually those lifestyle, that I feel like some of the lifestyle changes you have to make for long-term health, and actually I'd rather talk about health than, body image or weight or anything else, for long-term health, kind of mirror, I often think, how God works. He works like this, incrementally and building it. So I just think that it's an amazing opportunity right now to get this subject out into the open, because it's all over the news. I mean, like all over the news all the time, all over, especially social media, but also the general news. So let's just talk about it and say, how can we support this? What we're saying, Taste Like, how can we support you if you are taking weight loss drugs? How can we help you to make the deeper changes that get lasting results? So I think I would make a plea for that, really, that let's use this as an opportunity to get this out in the open. But you have to deal with the shame, because that is what so many people feel, especially in churches. Psalm 34 verse 5, those that look to the Lord are radiant, their faces never covered in shame. And it's just encouraging people to look to the Lord with it, rather than think, I've got to sort this all out, I just feel so awful, God must hate me, all of that. It's like actually looking to the Lord, giving him a chance.
So would
Can
you?
I give Cherry a chance to talk about this as well?
Yeah, well, I was just going to ask you, would you link sort of weight loss drugs into sort of eating disorders? Is it kind of the slippery slope, or are they a separate thing? I mean, there's the diet weight loss economy, the business model around that is huge, and there's so much marketing. So just because somebody's taking weight loss drugs doesn't necessarily mean they have an eating disorder, but it may be on the same sort of patterning of thinking around body image, body dysmorphia, unhealthy thoughts around eating, and then therefore those people are more at risk. Is that what we're saying? Or is it a totally separate issue?
I think for certainly for younger people, well, and adults as well, there is this concern, isn't there, Di, that people who have been on the jab for a long time actually can go on to develop an eating disorder, because when they then come off the jabs, they start putting the weight back on. Like as Di said, 90% of people put the weight back on. And because they're not used to this, causes this confusion in their relationship with food. And so paradoxically, they go on to develop an eating disorder. And the other issue is around people who are actually don't need to lose weight, who then go on the jab, particularly, younger people or those who are obsessed with body image and building muscle, that they could be taking drugs that actually are harming them, weight loss drugs included. But that is also, a big concern around the use of weight loss.
And because they're not controlled anymore by prescription, if you can afford them and get hold of them, then you can take them. So is there like an age limit on these, or should we be worried that our children could buy them online?
Technically, there's an age limit. They're easy to get hold of, unfortunately. So you can just misrepresent yourself in order to get them. And yes, you're right that it's the unregulated use of them that is the big concern. But it's sweeping the world, for want of a better word, developed world. And I think it's very difficult to know what's going to happen. I think that the big pharma companies are racing to try and produce something that you could be on long term, because you can't really be on these long term. But I don't know. I think it's going to be a massive complication to our relationship with food yet again, for those who are more prone to putting on weight. But also, that I saw something the other day about a young singer in America who was already slender, who took the drugs because of the pressure to look thinner, look thinner, look thinner. And now she's got terrible osteoporosis, losing bone mass. And she had no idea. She had no idea that was a danger. So it's like, yeah, I'm trying not to be over dramatic about this, but it is a bit scary. It is scary. And Cherry, how is that going to avoid? I'm just thinking about boys and the muscle thing. How is it going to affect that?
Well, I mean, obviously there are boys out there who are desperate to build muscle, because as a society, our attitude to now what boys and young men apparently should look like has changed enormously over the last 20 odd years. You only have to go and have a look at magazines covers, and it's the amount of bare flesh, let's say, that's on display, abs and get this body, and how to get ripped abs, and all of this is just, it's so in your face. I find it really alarming. And so, I can see how for younger people, teenagers and young adults, the desire to get that look and to fit in will potentially drive them to using jabs, other drugs, which particularly for younger people, boys and men, and young girls as well, who there are some who want to get super fit. But the danger is that because their bodies are still developing, that it's going to put a lot of strain on their bones and their growing bones and their muscles, which can cause longer term damage, which at that age they're not necessarily aware of. And as you say about this singer in America, Di, she didn't know that one of the side effects was potential osteoporosis. I think that is where I feel there's this need for trying to help particularly young people, but adults too, to differentiate between fact and hearsay, or fact and myth. Because when you have all this information available, and it's so easy just to scroll and scroll and scroll, it's very hard to discern what's real and what's not real. It could just be someone saying, I'm a specialist in this area, but actually they're not. we can all so
Yeah.
easily fall for it,
Well,
whether
yeah, and
we are
it's
a teenager or adult.
Yeah, well, it's international as well. So you'll get somebody from another country sort of spouting a qualification or saying I'm a coach, and you can't track through. And they're all selling things, whether they're selling their influence and just getting lots of followers and monetizing it that way, or they're selling products or protein or exercise equipment or just their regime. And as you say, there's so much out there. How do we know? And most of it is designed for, I would say, men in their 20s and 30s rather than teenage boys. But that might be their primary following on social media, is these sort of 16-year-old boys, but they're actually giving advice that would work for a 30-year-old. So again, it's I suppose talking to our young people, talking to our sons and daughters and trying to give them the wisdom to navigate this digital universe that they now live in. But also I think it's very easy to fall for it as an adult. It's very easy. Like, it's all targeted ads. It's all, and sometimes I'm convinced it's listening to you, like you talk to somebody about, oh, I'm feeling a bit heavy after Christmas. And all of a sudden, all the ads that come up on your thing are to do with weight loss. You're like, how does it know? Or is it just doing this because it's January? But it does feel like it's responsive to you, and it's terrifying on one level. Yeah, so as you say, let's keep talking about it. Let's have a healthy theology of who God is and what God actually cares about. But also maybe it's this taking the focus off the body and off our looks, and not that we should not care about it at all, but it has become an idolatry, I think, of like, I must look a certain way, and I have no value unless I look a particular way, or I'm at this body weight or percentage of body fat, I'm a bad person. So yeah, if we've got like youth leaders listening to this, if we've got children's leaders, I guess, can you give us like a quick, like, watch out if you see this is a danger sign, you really need to step in, and and as we've talked about, sort of setting a culture, but also like, what are the signals or the signs? Because part of the problem with all these eating disorders is it's very personal, it's very quiet, it's done on your own, people are avoiding eating with others. So how can you spot it if it's done so secretively?
That's a really, really question. You're absolutely right that it is very secret, and people, whatever age, who have any kind of eating disorder get very clever at hiding things. So I think the answer really is, as a youth leader, you will get to know children and young people quite well over the years. You know who they are. And I think the biggest thing is that there's been a change. And a change is not necessarily a physical one. It may be. It may be they're suddenly losing a lot of weight, or they've suddenly gained a lot of weight. But I think it's more to do with their attitude to food and exercise. They might be talking about it all the time. It might be that they have become more withdrawn. They don't want to eat, as you say. Some are not wanting to eat with others where previously they would. And I think it's that when changes in food and eating habits happen, which are quite drastic, it will affect the brain and how we feel. It will affect our emotions, and it can cause low mood and anxiety. And that is probably more noticeable than many of the other signs and symptoms of someone struggling with an eating disorder. I think that the other thing to watch out for is, like I said, somebody's talking about it a lot and talking about how they've got to lose weight, or they've got to go to the gym, or whatever it might be, that it's becoming somewhat obsessive. The other red flag, as we would call it, is that it's affecting family as well. So other members of the family, and there's concern with, the parents or carers are concerned about their young person as well. So that is also a sign that something isn't right. And that is when that young person with a carer should go and see the GP straight away, and to find out what support there is for them locally to start. Yeah, early intervention is key. And yeah, the earlier the better.
And I was going to say, my hunch is that young people might not want help. It might be that there's concern from parents and youth leaders, but the young person's like, no, this is what I want to do. I want to lose the weight. I want to control my eating, or I want to be bigger and go to the gym. If you've got a reluctant, I mean, this is the £100 million question, isn't it? If you've got a reluctant person who doesn't want help, what can you do?
Well, the parents can also go, and not necessarily with the young person, but they can go and discuss it with the GP, who may have some suggestions, because the help is very local. So there might be help available within that area, which is different from a different area. So the starting point should always be the GP. They may then have some ideas of how to refer on to maybe the CAMS teams to get the help that is needed. But you're right, it's really hard when somebody, whatever their age, doesn't want the help to get better. So yeah, Di, do you want to add anything?
I think when we started this, I was just thinking about if I was a youth leader, thinking that person there, she or he starting to wearing really baggy clothes, never used to wear baggy clothes. Seems to be like really keen to help other people eat, but never eats herself. What's going on here? I think when we started this, we were careful. We were like, okay, what should we do? Let's talk about it. Let's think about what we do. Let's because we've got to be careful here. And nowadays, I'm like, it's too dangerous if you even suspect there's something going on with a teen underage, under 18. Then you need to try and get alongside them and say, this is what I'm seeing. I really care about you. And I'm just noticing lately, this is what I see. We always say, stick to the facts, say what you're seeing rather than accusing them of anything or guessing, you know, anything going on you want us to talk about, I'm your friend, I'm here, all of that. We actually do some training on this, but it's like, and then I would talk to the other members of the youth team or staff team or whatever, and I would talk to the parents. Because even if there's a really complicated relationship there, if that child then gets seriously ill and you didn't say anything, how would you, that
Yeah. No, it's
too dangerous.
guarding
Too
protocol,
dangerous.
isn't it?
So we also have a resource that helps you work out, okay, in this situation, what are my points of action Cherry has created? Because I think and that's available free to churches, because I think it's a really important question. I think with adults it's harder because it's harder, but it's trying to get along. It's just trying to get alongside people, isn't it? And being their friend, offering to walk alongside. If I see this, I'm wondering this, but it's up to you. I'm here if you want some help. But it is hard. But I think if you are seriously worried, like with our daughter, we just had to step in, and she was over 18. Otherwise, she would have died. So it's like there are times when it's like, I don't care about my relationship with you. I'm going to have to say something and do something. I don't know, Cherry, do you agree with that? Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I do agree. Yes, I think, as you say, it's coming alongside them and expressing your concerns and inviting them to share. Because the thing is, it's not actually about food. It will be about all the other stuff that's going on. And I think just, again, giving them the opportunity to know that you are there. And it may not happen straight away, but I think with that checking in, just keep checking in. And I think for those who are working within the church environment, either paid or unpaid, there will already be the safeguarding policy in place. So I think the importance of the safeguarding policy is, well, it's very useful. It's there. It's a tool ready to be used, and I think people need to remember it's there to help them in these situations. And so always to consult with other members of the team if you are concerned about a particular young person or a child. And as Di said, talking to parents is important as well. And also, I just want to say that just last month, there's been a change in the guidelines for GPs to no longer use the strict measures that were used for young people who are being referred for the eating disorder services. So now the focus is much more on the changes in the young person's behaviour and the family's concerns. So now the recommendation is that if there's any concern at all for a young person, is to get the GP's involvement, and GPs are being encouraged to refer straight away.
Yeah, we see that's definite improvement, isn't it?
Yes, that is definitely an improvement. Yeah, definitely.
It makes sense because, as you say, every single person is going to be unique. And so
Yeah.
to meet certain criteria to get over a threshold, it's like you don't want the person nearly dying to get over a threshold to get
No,
treatment.
exactly.
You want to catch it earlier before these behaviours and thoughts are totally embedded.
Absolutely.
Obviously, even at whatever level, it's distressing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I can imagine, though, that the NHS, as you described, there's a huge uptick in people reporting. So the NHS is probably going to be overwhelmed. And so, not that the church can take over from the NHS, it obviously has to be a partnership, but that there will be definitely space for resourcing, equipping, coming alongside families within a church context with education. So if people want to get trained up to do Taste Life courses, how do they find out more about that?
What a lovely question. Yes, we'll just get in touch because that is obviously what we do. So we have two streams, I guess. So one is a straightforward education that we can do online or face-to-face, bespoke, whatever, to help people respond well to eating disorders in church situations or outside church situations. Do it for anyone because the need is so great. But secondly, we do train people, volunteers, to run our community course. So we have churches around the country. Pre-COVID, that was all kind of like church face to face, running the community course, get trained, weekend training, and off you go. And we back you up and give you full support in order to do that. Usually, we prefer two people to run it at a time because it's obviously a demanding thing to do, but so incredibly rewarding, And we have an amazing track record of 86% of the people who do our recovery course report significant progress in their eating disorder recovery journey, which we're very excited about. And so we can train churches and support them to run in the community, but we also offer it online now because of COVID and stuff. We took it all online. It works just as well there. So if people want to do that, or they can get involved in us in different ways. But thinking about your local church, either you or maybe a group of churches doing it together, because it's a specialist thing. Some people are want to run a mile, others are going to be really interested. So actually getting a group of people, group of churches, it can make it a bit more sustainable. But
Does
just
it
get in touch.
Does it need to run in a church building? I'm imagining, like, could you get trained and then offer to run it in a local high school?
Oh, of course, of course. And Cherry will say a bit. Cherry, you still with us? Cherry will say a bit more about the youth side of it. But as far as recovery course is concerned, and we recommend like sort of 15 to 99 as far as age group is concerned. But if you're under 18, you come with an adult. Yes, of course not. So you can run it where you want, and there's two ways of doing it. So we have it's designed for those of all faiths or none, but it has a church supplement. So if you're running it within the church for the church community, all the God stuff is there and helping you make those vital connections between your faith and what's going on physically, like you were talking about earlier, thinking through some of what God says about body image. There's no condemnation now in Christ Jesus, and how we are totally acceptable just as we are, whatever that. So all of that, but also it can be used as outside church communities outreach, needs-based outreach, just blessing your community with a resource that is so desperately needed for people also. So Cherry, do you want to add to that about how you would get to use Food, Feelings and Faith or the youth track?
Yeah. So the youth track has been developed. That is secular, and it's for use within schools or settings where they're not allowed to introduce elements of faith. And the Food, Feelings and Faith is basically the same version. It's the same resource, but we have incorporated a workbook which has got questions around faith and looking at scripture and what does God say about food and body image. And so there are these two ways of getting information into young people, whether it's through the schools or through the youth group, through the church youth group. Those resources don't need any training. So they are designed already for someone to just literally pick them up. Obviously, you need to prepare, but you don't need any specific training in order to run the course. So it's just three sessions for youth track or Food, Feelings and Faith, 3 1-hour sessions. And it's easy to pick up and run with. And, it's been designed so that wants to get the information out there and to engage with young people and get them talking about food and, their relationships with food, then it's there. It's ready to pick up and run with.
So just wanted, in case I didn't make it clear. So there's like two versions. One with God, obviously, one with God hidden, which is the same, as the recovery course.
So the recovery courses is to be run in the community and is for any age, and the teen one is obviously for sort of 11 to 18, I'm guessing.
Yeah, 11. Yeah, so the ideal ages are 11 to 16. But having said that, it's been used with older teens and even some people in their early 20s. And they've also got a lot out of it because it provides a space for discussion. So it's very flexible in that sense. And it's also been used, certainly the youth track has been used within schools by youth workers working within schools, or school mentors or school counsellors in either a small group or a one-to-one setting as well, which has had a really good impact on helping young people to, again, it's getting that language and that permission to talk about their relationship with food. So it's been used in a really wide variety of ways. So it could be like whole classes or whole groups or down to one-to-one settings.
I think it's fascinating because on one level, it's like you don't have to have a diagnosis. You don't have to have the problem to talk about this. Actually, food and how we think about food, how we relate to it, it's universal. We all need to think about it and we could all get a bit healthier about it. So it has universal appeal, but obviously for some people, it'll be totally life-changing. So, yeah,
brilliant.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Di and Cherry, for all that you're doing in this area. I know for some people this will be such a lifeline, and I'm just thinking of the youth leaders and church leaders listening to this going, yes, this is something we need to pick up. So what's the website that you want to send them to find out more?
So it's Taste Life UK. Get the UK in as well. tastelifeuk.org. Yeah, and it tells you everything you need to know, but also we're at the end of the phone and email. Very happy to talk to anyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. This has been a deeply moving conversation with Di and Cherry, reminding us that our identity is found in being fearfully and wonderfully made children of God, not in our shape or size. Whether it's spotting red flags like a young person suddenly wearing baggy clothes or withdrawing from shared meals, the call for us is, as a church, to model kindness and break the taboo surrounding these topics. You might want to share this podcast with your youth leaders, pastoral care teams, or small group leaders to discuss how you can create a safe place for those struggling with their relationship with food. You can also read an article by Di and Cherry, What the Church Needs to Know About Weight Loss Drugs and Body Dysmorphia, which provides further insight into the risks of unregulated drug use and practical ways churches can support healthy lifestyles without shame. You can find it on the Roots website, rootsforchurches.com. To find more resources, including the Food, Feelings and Faith course for youth groups, or information on training to become a Taste Life leader, visit tastelifeuk.org. A vital way to support your ministry and your congregation's growth and discipleship is to subscribe to Roots. We offer weekly lectionary-based resources that help you integrate these tough conversations into your worship and teaching. Each week, we offer Check-In, a resource for youth leaders connecting the weekly sessions with what's going on in youth culture. We have a wealth of seasonal and topical content covering ideas like food, health, anxiety, and so much more. You can find out more and take a free trial at rootsforchurches.com. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe and share it with your friends and network, and leave us a review. Together, we can grow.